She was 18 when they sold her to a corpse. The council called it a noble sacrifice to save our starving pack, but as Gwendolen stood before the dying Alpha King, his silver eyes completely feral, she realized this wasn't a marriage. It was an execution, and she refused to be the victim. Historical archives from the northern parishes often glaze over the brutal winter of 1422, a season the locals grimly refer to as the Winter of the Red Snow. It was a time when the medieval werewolf packs of the Highlands were pushed to the brink of extinction. At the heart of this historical nightmare was Gwendolen Crawford, the 18-year-old daughter of the late Alpha Clayton Crawford. Since her father's death in a border skirmish, the Ironwood Pack had fallen under the control of the Council of Elders, led by the ruthless and calculating Elder Gabriel Thatcher. Under Thatcher's regime, the pack had withered. Food stores were empty, the borders were constantly breached by rogues, and the once proud Ironwood wolves were reduced to desperate scavengers. But Thatcher had a plan, one that required a pawn. Gwendolen was summoned to the great stone hall of Ironwood Keep on a freezing Tuesday morning. She stood before the council, her breath pluming in the frigid air, wearing her father's old riding cloak. The Kincaid pack of the northern wastes is preparing to march on our borders. Elder Thatcher announced, his voice echoing off the damp stone walls. King Alfred Kincaid has gone feral. He is dying of a mysterious wasting disease, and his inner circle is desperate to ground his wolf before he passes, lest he tear his own stronghold apart in a mad frenzy. They demand a royal bride of alpha blood to calm him. If we provide one, they will send us grain meat and military protection. If we refuse, they will slaughter us all by the next full moon. Gwendolen felt the blood drain from her face. King Alfred was a legend, a massive, battle-scarred warrior known as the Beast of the Frost. Rumors said he was dying a slow, agonizing death, and that his mind had already slipped into the dark abyss of a feral beast. "You want to send me to die in his bedchamber?" Gwendolen said, her voice remarkably steady, despite the terror gripping her chest. "You are 18, Gwendolen," Thatcher replied coldly, slamming his heavy wooden staff against the floorboards. "You are the last of the Crawford bloodline. You owe this to the pack your father failed to protect. You will wed the dying king, or you will watch your people burn. The choice is yours." It was an ultimatum built on a trap. She had no choice. For the sake of the starving families she had grown up with, Gwendolen agreed. The journey to the Kincaid stronghold took a grueling 2 weeks through treacherous, snow-choked mountain passes. Gwendolen was accompanied only by a small escort of Thatcher's guards and her loyal handmaiden, Clara. As they crossed the jagged peaks of the Black Ridge Mountains, the imposing silhouette of Kincaid Keep loomed into view. It was less of a castle and more of a military fortress carved directly into the black rock of the mountainside. Upon arrival, there was no grand reception, no royal fanfare. The atmosphere was suffocatingly grim, reeking of pine needles, wet fur, and despair. Gwendolen was immediately stripped of her wet riding leathers and forced into a heavy, dark velvet wedding gown that felt more like a burial shroud. She was escorted down a series of damp, torchlit corridors by the king's heavily armed guards. They stopped before massive iron-reinforced oak doors. The guards unbarred the doors with trembling hands, revealing the king's bedchamber. The room was vast, dark, and suffocatingly hot, heated by a roaring hearth. In the center of the room lay a massive 4-poster bed, and upon it was King Alfred Kincaid. He was restrained. Thick, silver-lined iron cuffs bound his wrists and ankles to the heavy bedposts. He was stripped to the waist, his heavily scarred, muscular chest heaving with labored breaths. His skin was unnaturally pale, slick with a feverish sweat, and thick black veins spider-webbed up his neck and across his jawline. As Gwendolen stepped into the room, his head snapped toward her. His eyes were not the cloudy eyes of a dying man. They were a piercing, luminous, silver wild feral, and utterly terrifying. A deep, guttural snarl vibrated in his chest, rattling the very chains that held him. But the moment his gaze locked onto Gwendolen, the snarl abruptly choked off. A heavy electric shockwave ripped through the room. The air snapped with unseen static. Gwendolen gasped, clutching her chest as a searing heat bloomed in her heart. It was the mate bond, the rare, mythic soul tether between two wolves. Alfred's feral gaze softened for a fraction of a second, his silver eyes widening in recognition. He fought against the heavy chains, reaching a desperate, trembling hand toward her. "Mate!" He rasped his voice, sounding like two grinding stones. Then his eyes rolled back, and he collapsed against the pillows, seized by a violent, agonizing cough that brought up dark blood. He wasn't just a monster. He was her mate, and he was dying right in front of her. The wedding took place mere hours later, conducted in the stifling heat of the sick room. Father Donovan, a trembling elderly priest, rushed through the ancient medieval vows. The air was thick with the scent of myrrh and the metallic tang of Alfred's blood. Because the king was too weak to stand, Gwendolen knelt by the bedside. Alfred drifted in and out of consciousness. During a brief moment of lucidity, his silver eyes found hers. "You should not be here, little wolf," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the crackling fire. "When the madness takes me entirely, I will kill you." "You are chained to a bed," Gwendolen replied quietly, her voice stealing. "I think I can outrun you." A faint ghost of a smirk touched his pale lips before another wave of agony seized him. To seal the marriage, the traditional blood oath was required. Father Donovan handed Gwendolen a silver dagger. She sliced the palm of her hand, wincing as the blade bit deep, and then gently took Alfred's massive calloused hand. She made a mirroring cut on his palm and pressed their hands together. As their blood mingled, the mate bond flared violently. Gwendolen felt a rush of Alfred's emotions, crushing pain, deep sorrow, and a terrifying, raging power that was slowly being snuffed out. Once the vows were concluded, the room was cleared. The doors were locked from the outside. Gwendolen was officially the queen of the northern wastes, locked in a cage with a dying predator. But Gwendolen was no helpless maiden. Her mother had been the pack's lead herbalist, and Gwendolen had spent her childhood memorizing the properties of every plant poultice and poison in the highlands. She approached the bed and examined her new husband. The dark veins, the black blood, the cold sweats, and the distinct faint odor of burnt iron lingering on his breath. She touched his burning forehead. Her fingers lingered on the pulse point at his neck. This was no wasting disease. Wolf's bane, not the common kind, but refined, heavily concentrated monkshood extract, administered slowly over months to bypass the werewolf's natural regenerative healing. Someone was murdering the Alpha King from the inside out. The heavy lock on the door clicked, and Gwendolen scrambled away from the bed as Dr. Aldous Penhaligon entered. He was a tall, skeletal man with cold eyes, carrying a silver tray with a steaming goblet. "My queen." Penhaligon purred, bowing low. "It is time for the king's healing tonic. It eases his suffering." Gwendolen's eyes locked onto the goblet. She stepped in front of the bed, blocking his path. "I will give it to him. Leave it." "With respect, your grace, the king can be volatile," Penhaligon countered, taking a step forward. "I am his mate, Doctor, and I am your queen." Gwendolen commanded, channeling every ounce of alpha blood in her veins. "Leave it. Now." Penhaligon's eyes narrowed, a flash of pure malice crossing his face, but he relented, setting the tray down on a nearby table. "As you wish, my queen. Pray for his soul." He bowed and exited the room. The moment the door locked, Gwendolen grabbed the goblet. She brought it to her nose and inhaled. There it was, beneath the heavy scent of mint and honey, was the unmistakable acrid bite of refined wolfsbane. She threw the liquid into the roaring fireplace. The flames hissed and flared an unnatural, toxic green. Her mind raced. Who would benefit from the king's death if Alfred died? His alpha power, by law of the newly sealed marriage, would transfer to her. She would become the absolute ruler of the Kincaid pack. But she was a foreigner, an 18-year-old girl with no military backing. She would need advisors. She would need her old counsel. Suddenly the pieces violently clicked together in her mind. Elder Gabriel Thatcher hadn't sent her here to be a sacrifice. He had sent her here to be his Trojan horse. Thatcher and Penhaligon were working together. Thatcher had forced her into this marriage, knowing Alfred was being poisoned. Once the king died, Gwendolen would inherit the massive northern army, and Thatcher would step in as her advisor, effectively taking control of both the Ironwood and Kincaid packs. She was never meant to save her pack. She was meant to hand Thatcher an empire. Gwendolen looked down at Alfred. He was breathing shallowly, his brow furrowed in pain. If she let him die, she would be a puppet queen, and Thatcher would rule with an iron fist, slaughtering anyone who opposed him. "No," Gwendolen whispered. She moved quickly, tearing strips of clean linen from her own petticoats. She rummaged through her travel trunk, pulling out the small wooden chest of herbs she had smuggled from home. Activated charcoal milk thistle and sweet fern. She began crushing the herbs furiously in a small mortar. She approached the bed and gently lifted Alfred's heavy head, resting it against her lap. "Alfred," she whispered, her voice gentle but firm. "Alfred, you have to drink this. It's going to taste like ash and mud, but you have to drink it." His silver eyes fluttered open, cloudier now, but fighting the darkness. "Let me go," he groaned, turning his head. "I will not," Gwendolen fiercely replied, using her own bloodied hand to pry his jaw open. "You are my mate, and my people are using your death to build a tyrannical empire. I am not letting you die, and you are going to help me destroy them." She tipped the muddy concoction into his mouth, massaging his throat to force him to swallow. Alfred gagged his body, violently rejecting the foul mixture, but Gwendolen held him tight, murmuring soothing words, letting her scent wash over him to calm his panicked wolf. Over the next 3 days, an intense, dangerous game of cat and mouse began within the sealed bedchamber. Every time Dr. Penhaligon brought the tonic, Gwendolen disposed of it and replaced it with her own detoxifying remedies. She slept in snatches, sitting upright in a chair by the bed, armed with a silver knife. Slowly, agonizingly, the black veins on Alfred's neck began to fade. The feral madness in his eyes began to clear, replaced by a sharp, calculating intelligence. Late on the 4th night, Gwendolen was nodding off in her chair when she heard the distinct sound of chains shifting. She bolted upright, her knife raised. Alfred was awake. He was no longer thrashing. He was sitting up against the headboard, looking at her with a clarity that took her breath away. "You've been throwing away my medicine," he said, his voice a deep, resonant rumble that sent a shiver down her spine. "It wasn't medicine," Gwendolen replied, refusing to back down from his intense gaze. "It was monkshood." Alfred looked at his wrists, still bound by the silver-lined iron. Then, with a sudden terrifying flex of his massive muscles, he yanked his arms outward. The heavy iron bolts tore straight out of the wooden bedposts with a deafening crack. He rubbed his raw wrists, his silver eyes locking onto hers with a deadly, predatory promise. "Then I suppose, my queen..." Alfred said, a dark, dangerous smile spreading across his face. "It is time we introduce Dr. Penhaligon to his own cure." Alfred stood towering over Gwendolen. Despite the lingering pallor of his skin and the hollows of his cheeks, the raw, suffocating aura of an Alpha King flooded the bedchamber. The very air grew heavy, pressing against Gwendolen's lungs. But her wolf purred under the pressure, recognizing its equal. "Penhaligon is merely the blade." Alfred rumbled his silver eyes, flashing with a predatory gleam. "We need to know whose hand is holding the hilt. If your elder Thatcher orchestrated this, he could not have done it without a conspirator within my own walls. The borders are too well guarded for foreign poison to slip in unnoticed." Gwendolen's mind raced, pulling from the whispered rumors of the Kincaid court she had heard from her handmaiden. "Lord Preston Montgomery." She breathed the name recorded in the private historical letters of the era as the architect of the Northern Famine. "He controls the trade routes. Thatcher promised military protection and grain. Montgomery could have easily smuggled the wolfsbane into the fortress under the guise of medicinal shipments." Alfred's jaw tightened. Montgomery has always craved the crown. But to challenge me directly is a death sentence. Poisoning me over months, letting the pack believe the madness of the feral curse took me. It is a coward's coup. He looked down at Gwendolen, reaching out to gently trace the bloody cut on her palm where their oath was sealed. The heat of his touch sent a jolt of electricity straight to her core. "You saved my life, little wolf. Now we must let them think they have won." The plan they formed in the flickering firelight was desperate and dangerous. Alfred the Healing was still weak. A direct assault on the guards outside would trigger a fortress-wide civil war before he could identify his loyalists. They needed the traitors to confess, gathered in one room, comfortable in their false victory. "Werewolves can lower their heart rates to a near-death state for short periods," Alfred explained, stepping back toward the ruined bed. "It is a meditation technique taught only to alphas to survive extreme blood loss. I will stop my heart. You must play the grieving widow. Bring them to me." Gwendolen nodded, her heart hammering against her ribs. She watched as Alfred lay back upon the blood-stained linens. He closed his eyes, his massive chest rising in one deep final breath, and then nothing. He went completely still. To the naked eye and even to the keen senses of a werewolf, Alfred Kincaid was dead. Gwendolen waited 5 agonizing minutes, letting the silence stretch before she fell to her knees and unleashed a harrowing, blood-curdling scream. Footsteps thundered down the stone corridor. The heavy iron locks clattered, and the double doors burst open. Dr. Penhaligon rushed in, followed by 4 heavily armed guards. "The king!" Gwendolen sobbed, burying her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with feigned, absolute terror. He stopped breathing. The fever took him. Penhaligon's eyes lit up with a sickening, victorious glee. He practically sprinted to the bedside, pressing 2 fingers to Alfred's neck. He leaned down, listening for a breath. Finding nothing, a cruel smile stretched across his gaunt face. "The king is dead," Penhaligon announced, turning to the guards. "Send word to the Great Hall. Summon Lord Montgomery, and tell our honored guest that the hour has arrived." Honored guest. Gwendolen's blood ran cold. Thatcher was here. Less than 10 minutes later, the bedchamber filled with the scent of pine, wet wool, and arrogant triumph. Lord Preston Montgomery, a portly werewolf, adorned in expensive furs, strode in with a smug satisfaction radiating from his pores. Right beside him, wrapped in his heavy traveling cloak, was Elder Gabriel Thatcher. He had followed her bridal party, waiting in the shadows of the nearby village for the poison to finish its work. A tragic day for the northern wastes. Thatcher drawled his voice utterly devoid of mourning. He looked at Gwendolen, who was kneeling by the fireplace, her face pale. "But a necessary transition. You have played your part perfectly, my dear." "You killed him," Gwendolen whispered, letting her voice tremble. "You used me." "I used a piece on a chessboard," Thatcher corrected, stepping closer. "With Alfred gone, you are the ruling queen by right of the blood oath. But a young, naive girl cannot rule the fiercest pack in the realm. Lord Montgomery and I have signed a treaty. The Ironwood and Kincaid packs will merge under one banner. I will serve as your chief advisor, and Montgomery will be your Lord Regent. You will sit on the throne, smile, and do exactly as you are told." "And if I refuse?" Gwendolen challenged, lifting her chin. Montgomery chuckled darkly. "If you refuse, little Queen Doctor, Penhaligon will discover that the tragic, feral madness that claimed your husband was highly contagious. You will die in this very bed before the week is out, and the crown will pass to my bloodline, regardless." "It truly is a flawless design," Penhaligon purred, wiping his hands on a linen cloth. "The poison leaves no trace. The monks of the Eastern Ridge refine it beautifully. Now give Lord Montgomery the Alpha seal." Thatcher held out his hand. "The ring, Gwendolen. Take it off the beast's finger and hand it to me. Your pack's survival depends on your obedience." Gwendolen looked at the three men, the men who had starved her people, tortured her mate, and plotted to usurp a kingdom through cowardly deceit. She slowly rose to her feet, wiping the fake tears from her cheeks. The trembling in her shoulders stopped, replaced by an imposing, rigid stillness. "I don't think I will," Gwendolen said, her voice dropping an octave, ringing with the authority of an alpha's daughter. Thatcher sneered. "Foolish girl. Guards, restrain her." The 4 guards stepped forward, but before they could even draw their swords, a sound echoed through the chamber that froze the blood in their veins. It was a low, vibrating growl, deep and resonant, shaking the glass in the window panes. Lord Montgomery whipped his head around toward the bed. Penhaligon gasped, dropping his linen cloth. Alfred Kincaid was sitting up, his silver eyes glowing with a terrifying, unearthly light locked onto the conspirators. The heavy, suffocating pressure of his alpha aura slammed into the room like a physical shockwave. The 4 guards immediately dropped to their knees, their wolves instinctively submitting to the absolute power of their true king. "It seems," Alfred rumbled, his voice dark with lethal intent, "reports of my demise were greatly exaggerated." He swung his massive legs over the side of the bed. Though he was unarmed and half-naked, he moved with the terrifying grace of an apex predator. "Treason!" Montgomery stammered, stepping backward, using Thatcher as a human shield. "Guards, kill him. He is feral. The madness has him." The guards didn't move. They couldn't. Alfred's aura held them pinned to the floorboards. Thatcher's face turned an ashen grey. "This is impossible. The dosage." He shot a panicked glare at Penhaligon. "You said he was finished." "He was—" Penhaligon shrieked, backing toward the door. "He took enough monkshood to kill 3 alphas." "I had a brilliant physician," Alfred said, smoothly stepping in front of Gwendolen, shielding her with his body. "My queen has quite the talent for botany." With a roar, Alfred lunged. He didn't even bother fully shifting into his wolf form. He simply grabbed Lord Montgomery by the throat, hoisting the heavy man off the floor with one hand. Montgomery clawed frantically at Alfred's iron grip, his face turning purple. "You invited rodents into my home, Preston." Alfred hissed, his fangs elongating. "You poisoned my blood. You starved my people while hoarding grain in your private estates. The punishment for treason against the Alpha is death." With a sickening crunch, Alfred crushed Montgomery's windpipe and tossed his lifeless body aside like a discarded rag doll. Thatcher, realizing his grand empire was crumbling into dust, pulled a concealed silver dagger from his cloak and lunged at Gwendolen, hoping to kill the mate and break the king's focus. But Gwendolen was the daughter of Clayton Crawford. As Thatcher swung the blade, she sidestepped the clumsy attack, grabbed Thatcher's wrist, and twisted it violently. The bone snapped with a loud crack, and the dagger clattered to the stone floor. Before Thatcher could scream, Gwendolen drove her knee into his stomach, sending the elder collapsing to the ground, gasping for air. "You betrayed my father's memory," Gwendolen said coldly, standing over the pathetic, gasping man. "You starved our pack to feed your own ambition. You are no elder. You are a parasite." Meanwhile, Penhaligon had managed to pry the heavy oak door open and was scrambling into the corridor. "Bring him back," Alfred commanded the trembling guards. The guards, desperate to prove their loyalty and avoid the king's wrath, leaped up and dragged the screaming doctor back into the bedchamber, throwing him at Alfred's feet. Alfred walked over to the silver tray that still held the morning's dose of poison. He picked up the goblet. "A physician should always trust his own medicine. Don't you agree, Doctor?" Alfred asked quietly. "Mercy, your grace, I beg you." Penhaligon sobbed, his hands clasped together in frantic prayer. "Thatcher made me do it. He promised me wealth. Drink it!" Alfred commanded, his voice echoing with the irresistible Alpha command. Penhaligon's body violently shook. Against his own will, compelled by the magical weight of the Alpha's order, his trembling hands reached up and took the goblet. Tears streamed down his face as he forced the toxic brew down his throat. Within seconds he collapsed, clutching his stomach, as the highly concentrated wolfsbane burned through his system, delivering the very agony he had inflicted upon his king. Alfred turned his attention to Thatcher, who was cradling his broken arm. "Lock this traitor in the deepest cell of the dungeon," Alfred ordered the guards. "At dawn, send a raven to the Ironwood pack. Inform them their elder is dead, and that their new king and queen will be sending wagons of grain and meat before the week is out." As the guards dragged Thatcher away, silence descended upon the ruined bedchamber. The threat was neutralized. The traitors were dead or imprisoned. Alfred let out a long, exhausted breath. The adrenaline fading his knees buckled. Gwendolen rushed forward, catching him before he hit the floor. She draped his heavy arm over her shoulders and guided him back to the edge of the bed. "You pushed yourself too far," she scolded softly, grabbing a fresh linen cloth to wipe the sweat from his brow. Alfred looked at her, the feral glow in his eyes completely replaced by a deep, profound warmth. He reached up his rough fingers, tracing her jawline. "I was a dead man, chained in the dark," he whispered. "You walked into the lion's den unarmed and brought me back to the light. They thought they were sacrificing a helpless girl, but they sent me a warrior." "I am a Crawford," Gwendolen smiled, leaning into his touch, the mate bond singing a beautiful harmonic resonance in her chest. "We don't know how to play the victim." He leaned in, capturing her lips in a kiss that tasted of blood, victory, and an unbroken promise. It was the beginning of a golden era for the northern wastes. The history books would no longer remember the winter of the red snow as a time of starvation. They would remember it as the season the beast of the frost found his winter queen, and together they purged the highlands of shadows. Did Gwendolen's courage leave you breathless? The Winter Queen and her beast proved true. Power isn't given. It's taken if you loved this tale of betrayal, revenge, and fated mates. Hit that like button. Share this video with your fellow fantasy romance addicts. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more epic werewolf dramas. Ring the bell so you never miss a thrilling story.